So, good morning or good night, depending where you are, and welcome to another interview of The Shield Doing a Couch. I'm your host, Hector, and today I'm joined by Jon Thor. Let me see if I can pronounce the last name correct. Sigurleifsson. Uh,
Close,
right.
Sigurleifsson. Yeah.
And he's from the band Kilprez, and it's a one-man band. I really was listening to your EP, and he plays a lot of different styles into one. So thank you for taking some time to talk with me. How are you today? How's everything over there in Sweden?
It's really nice, and I was actually I was laughing about this earlier, that it's been really warm here compared to Sweden, and I got this Facebook memory that 4 years ago I was living in Miami, and the heat was probably around, double the amount of, at least in Celsius, that it is here right now. And I was thinking, I guess my tolerance has changed a little bit. Not that I ever ever truly got used to the Miami heat.
Florida heat is horrible, because you can't escape it. How long did you live here?
I lived for about a year in Miami, more specifically in Miami Lakes.
Right.
But it was good. Yeah. I got to know some amazing people, had some great experiences, but in Sweden now.
Yeah, and I'm sure Sweden is nicer. I've never been there, but I would love to go. So I know that your last album, The Patron, Saint of Lost Cause, came August of last year. So it's been almost a year now. But it's very interesting. The sounds, like every song sounds different, and there's different vocal deliveries. How would you describe the sound of the band to people who haven't listened to it?
So this is something that, as many musicians out there probably relate to, is it's a little bit of a difficult question often, especially if you don't, if the goal of your musical project is not to sound like someone else, it's often difficult to nail it down. But I feel like where I ended up sort of landing as my go-to description is injecting, I guess, influences from like emo and screamo, as well as sass, sort of punk hardcore, into mathcore and progressive metal. So the sort of very intricate instrumentation, but layering on top of that a bit of like this chaotic and very emotive vocal delivery. And with Patron Saint of Lost Causes, it was an interesting album to make because I'd basically spent years never quite finishing anything, working with a lot of different musicians, often coming close to actually doing something, but either having member problems in bands or perfectionist problems inside my own head, and never quite reaching that finish line. So that album was, in many ways, a really important one for me to make at that time, both from a musical perspective, a personal achievement perspective, and of course, lyrical as well.
No, it's and I want to touch upon the themes that you touch upon on the album. What are the major themes and topics that you discuss on that debut record?
So to be honest, when I started writing that album, it was middle of the pandemic, and I was living in the UK when the pandemic hit and it went into total lockdown. So basically the internet was like the only bridge into the world that I really had, which is not to say that it wasn't a massive bridge into the world before the pandemic as well, but it sort of burned all the other bridges via the pandemic. And I found myself just getting increasingly frustrated and hopeless with the state of the world's discourse, especially when it came to political matters. You see people, everything from like the, I guess, micro level of like the discussion of representation in movies and games and TV, over to things like what we're seeing happening over there in the States now with Roe versus Wade being overturned, with these insane border patrol changes that are just changing horrible things when it comes to human rights and civil rights. And I was seeing all of this pop up and being sort of locked down on social media with all these people arguing and spouting hateful nonsense. I just found myself getting into arguments, spending a lot of time and energy arguing with people. And part of me thought, why am I doing this? I'm never going to change this person's opinion or perspective. They just want to hate. But the other part of me thought about this, and I've thought about this ever since I was a kid or a teenager, because I've always been quite outspoken about my views on these sort of things. But then I started thinking, well, even if just one person out there who feels subjected to this hate, if just one person out there who's surrounded by the discourse that who they are and what they are is something worth hating, sees someone stand up for them, like if that can just give someone a little bit of hope, I was like, yeah, I'll spend my energy arguing with these people. But after some time, I felt like I was spending too much energy on that, and I wasn't really getting much back. There wasn't that feedback loop. And around that time as well, my work life slowed down a lot, as it did for a lot of people in the pandemic. And I found myself with more time and energy on my hands than I had before. And I decided finally, after a few years of putting my career first, to get back into learning more in recording, mixing, and mastering. And obviously I needed something to record, so I started getting more again into the writing. And it was really, I guess, there that the ball started rolling, even though it wasn't until a few months later where, when I moved over to Sweden, I decided to set up a little bit of a home studio setup in here, and decided in probably January, February last year, I went, cool, by the middle of the year, I want to have an album ready. July 1st, I want to release a single. I don't just want to release a single. I want the single to come out and be able to say, here, you can pre-order the album. It's ready to go. Because I didn't want to do the whole big things are coming kind of thing, the
Yeah, were you
local
like,
band thing.
please, and don't give anything?
Yeah. And especially with the topics that I wanted to cover, to kind of not veer too far away from that. I knew that I didn't just want it to be like that one political song on the album. I really wanted to put all of this pent up frustration and energy into something that was a bit of a statement. And that turned out to be a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because typically in the past, when I've worked on music projects, either on my own or with bands, I've been very poetic in my lyrical assembly. Like I've used a lot of analogies, and things haven't been the clearest, but I was like, cool, I'm going to talk against bigotry. I'm going to talk against hatred. I'm going to talk for all these things I believe in. I was like, yeah, I don't want to disguise it. I don't want it to be under a layer of poetry. Yeah. I was like, I just want to go in like no holds barred, just say what I mean. And I knew that would be a little bit divisive. And I've heard from some people who love it and say, oh, I love that you just kind of spoke your mind. Some people would like it to have a little bit of a layer of metaphors or different ideas. But I felt like in that moment, both in order to get the message across and also to keep to my deadline, there was something kind of pure, something a little bit raw about just writing something that came so directly from my heart and my mind out my mouth. I go into the walk-in closet that I've changed into a little bit of a makeshift vocal booth, scream my little heart out for the causes I believe in, and then yeah, that just it felt right. It felt right.
No, it's awesome. And obviously right now you touch upon Roe versus Wade. We were chatting offline before about this. Sophie's pro-choice really hits on that topic, and right, it's crazy that you what's happening, that you can go and like take out a law that really protects women. And you're thinking it's I had never seen The Handmaid's Tale, but I've been told that it's something like that. So it's like going back, like we make progress and then you go back. And I'm not originally from this country. I moved from Puerto Rico, even though Puerto Rico is we're a territory of the United States, so we have citizenship. But you can, in this country, you can tell, like 20 years ago, I studied here for a year, And I've never felt racism in my life until when I moved in Michigan. And you could tell it the difference, even when I spoke, if they heard an accent, they would look at you funny. And it's topics that some people would rather not discuss and like under the rug. But I think it's important to discuss these topics openly. And not everyone's going to see eye to eye, but discuss it in a polite manner. But when you were saying about talking to people on the internet, yeah, sometimes that's a waste of time and energy.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're just repeating things that they don't know what they're repeating. Like a few years ago with the border, when they were keeping kids in cages.
Yeah.
And some people didn't care, because they were Hispanic. But if they were being like American, blonde, blue-eyed, everyone would have panicked more. But since they were minorities, I don't think they like spoke about it, like, yeah, and brushed it off. But it's at the end of the day, borders and nationalities, everyone's human. So yeah, I think we should all treat each other with kindness, and even though we have differences, at the end of the same, we all want the same things in life. So I like that in the album. I think it's bold, and yes, you're gonna get people who are gonna say like, "Oh, don't mix politics with rock and metal," and those are people that don't know the history of metal or rock music. Rock music came out of rebellion. Like, I still until this day don't understand where people say that they why does Rage Against the Machine political? Like, just look at their name. That's what they write about. But yeah, I like I think you name it Patron Saint of Lost Causes, because every song is a voice to people who experience the subjects that you're discussing on your debut record. So yeah, I think it's very important. When you were recording that, like, which was the hardest song for you to write, both lyrically and musically?
That's a really good question. I think maybe in a way, Forever for Now was one of the harder ones, because that was one where I did feel like it needed a little bit of that, I guess, poetic touch. And I tend to, when I write, if something doesn't flow pretty quickly, I tend to sort of leave it to the side, because then I'm like, oh, it's not really going smoothly. But with that song, I kept coming back to it. I started writing parts of it years and years ago with no clear agenda in sight. But what that song touches upon, and I think I've had a lot of questions from people who don't quite get what the topic or cause that I'm talking about there is. And really what that song is largely about is addiction. And I've had a lot of people in my life that have struggled with addiction, and I've seen the lack of empathy that people that struggle with addiction often get. I've seen the broken systems that are supposed to help them completely fail them. And it's hard to watch, but it's also hard when you're someone close to someone who struggles with addiction. It's hard not to blame them. It's hard not to be angry at them, but that doesn't solve anything. And I guess the difficulty with that song wasn't necessarily that it didn't come out or that I couldn't write it, but it touched upon something that was even closer to home, I guess, than many of the others, and really wanting to capture that in its raw essence was something that was a challenge I wanted to undertake, and it ended up being one of my favorite songs to actually work on, even though personally, if I were to try to take a step back and say like a name a favorite off the album, I don't know if I would necessarily choose it, but yeah, no, I think if I had to choose, I'd probably say that was one that was a little bit of a difficult birth.
No, yeah, and addiction is something I can relate to, because sadly in my family, I had an uncle who struggled with drugs for years, and and the family suffers. And there's so much type of addiction nowadays. People can be addicted to food, people can be addicted to staying inside or internet,
Yeah.
porn, anything that can be bad for you, it can be an addiction. So I really like the cover. Here's the the cover art for your debut album for Kilprez, or the Patron Saints of the Lost Causes. And I like that you put all the different colors, for the inclusion. What does the album cover mean for you?
So it's actually kind of a funny story because the album cover as a sketch predates the album by probably some years. So the artist behind it is my wife, and
Nice.
my wife and I have been collaborating on artistic projects ever since we met. We met as teenagers, and I remember one of the first times we met, like, she showed me her sketchbook and I got really excited about that. I showed her some of my music and we kind of bonded over that. And I've actually often joked to people that an early indicator that she was the one was the fact that she only had old Opeth albums in her shelf. um, but this sketch was something where, when I was working on the album, I had a real clear vision for the sound. I had a real clear vision for the approximate, even the length of the album. Like, I had really clear visions of a lot of things, but where I was struggling was giving her art direction, because she said, I want it to be something you want to have on the front of your album, but I kind of need to get an idea, even if it's like, I like this album cover, not this. And
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I was just completely blocked. And I asked her, like, can I just do what we did as teenagers and sit with a couple of your sketchbooks and just kind of flip through and see if anything sparks an idea? And I found this like half done sketch, which was what this ended up being based on. And it had this person ripping themselves open and the fire in the head. And I asked her, because one of the things that she does really well, and I love that she does, are these galaxy patterns. And I was like, what if there's a galaxy inside this person that's tearing themselves open? And I said, because if anything, this album is me trying to do that, both from a lyrical, vocal, um, and musical perspective. I'm trying to
Trying to
let
show it
loose
better.
all of these things that are living inside of me. And the fire on the head and the smoke coming out of the mouth, I felt was such a good metaphor for how all those internet arguments and all these reactions feel like. You hear someone say something so deeply offensive to a whole group of people, and you want to scream, you want to shout, and somehow the words often lack impact because the recipient isn't open to it. So that fire continues raging inside of your own head and your heart, but it falls short of actual action. And so many of us talk a loud game, but when it comes to supporting the people who need the support, it often falls flat. And there was something about this image that just really captured all of that for me, feeling like you have all this potential inside a whole galaxy, feeling like you have all this fire and passion and energy in your head, but being afraid that it'll just fizzle out into nothing but a pile of smoke. And when I realized that, I was like, yeah, I don't want it to be more complicated than this. This is like where I want it to land. And I think it did a great job of, she did a great job of really capturing that essence.
Yeah, no, it's really good, and it's awesome that you can like share that type of work with your wife, and I think it's smart that she had the old Opeth albums.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's funny, like, when I think back on, the first couple things that we really connected on was music. Like, she told me one of her favorite bands was My Dying Bride, and I was like, I was a teenager in Iceland. I didn't know anyone who listened to My Dying Bride. And we were talking and found out we both loved Anathema and Opeth, and we started introducing each other to music. And yeah, it's just been like that ever since. And we're both quite creative people, so we tend to see where we can work with each other on things moving forward.
Yeah. So in the album that you have, you play the guitar because you're a multi-instrumentalist. What other instruments do you play on that album? And you do all the vocals, correct?
Yeah, so I do all the vocals except there's a quick vocal feature on Colony Collapse by my friend Julian Parry.
Yeah, there's a
We
female vocalist, yeah, on the song.
Oh, so Julian is actually the male vocalist on Colony Collapse, but then the female vocalist on the final track is my wife as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So yeah, we used to be in a band together, but I can dive into that a little bit later in the interview as well. But yeah, so all the other vocals I do, and I play the guitar and the bass, and where on that album there's a couple of like keyboard or synth or piano bits sort of sprinkled in here and there, which I do as well, but there's more of that on future releases probably. But yeah, the drums are programmed though. I wish I could play drums like that, but for now I'm relying on a bit of MIDI, a bit of velocity programming, and a bit of mixing to get that done.
So you're currently working on a follow-up, new music. What can we expect? Is there going to be like a difference in sound and in themes?
I would say yes to both. So in terms of sound, well, actually, let me take a step back before I say that, because I think a really important factor that changed here is the whole approach to the album was a little bit different. With Patron Saint of Lost Causes, I approached it, if I compare it to writing a book, I sort of approached it like a book of short stories with a theme. You know, each song had a slightly different topic or something, but they all had something in common. But coming into this next album, I kind of wanted to go to my proggy roots from a compositional perspective and do it as a proper concept album. So it's a series of songs that have motifs that reference each other and little riffs that might come up in different versions, lyricals, callbacks across the album. But where I guess the proggy bit has diverged a little bit is I would say there's less progressive metal influence and more of the very aggressive mathcore and sort of screamo and sass influences. There's a lot of chromaticism, and I'm playing with a lot of whole tone composition. And I approached it as one big whole, so kind of working at it as a holistic story, I guess, while still trying to explore some different themes. And from a theme or lyric perspective, the story kind of again touches a little bit on addiction, mental health, and some philosophical themes, including the juxtaposition of the idea of solipsism, the idea that you can't really know anything for sure except your own consciousness exists. And the idea of sonder, which is these moments of realization that everyone around you has the depth of consciousness and experience that you do. And there was something that I found really interesting about the idea of someone who's in a self-destructive spiral, considering these two ideas, considering, is my self-destruction causing damage to others around me, or do others just not matter because I can't even know how they feel? I can't even know if they exist. And the idea of exploring these topics in, I guess, a musical genre as unhinged and chaotic like mathcore, and with the variety of influences that I wanted to explore, you know, adding more of some of the jazzy stuff, some of the electronic stuff, it made me really excited to test out new things musically and vocally to try to get this story across, for you to feel almost like you're getting a front row seat to the inner monologue of someone who's at a very bad place in his life.
It sounds very complex and interesting. Yes.
It's been kind of a complex process putting it together at times, but not so that it's been, I guess, forced or anything. But I had some ideas that I really wanted to explore compositionally that I wouldn't have given myself time for on Patron Saint, because I guess I put a very clear deadline there.
Yeah.
With this album, I wanted to intentionally give myself a few months where I would go, I'm not going to have a clear plan, except for the fact that I'm going to write something every day.
Yeah, no, that
And
sounds interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and it was like whether I sit by the piano, whether I sit down with a bass or a guitar or an acoustic guitar, or I play around with some electronics, just something. And then I would record those, and instead of like very much a guitarist in this way, I used to always write everything into Guitar Pro as soon as I wrote it. This tablature software, I would always write it down as soon as I wrote something. But I decided to test out stepping away from that process, and I recorded a lot of voice memos. And then I wouldn't listen to them, but a few days later I would go, I'm going to try to remember what I wrote a few days ago. And then I would record myself trying to remember. And I would often end up with 3, 4, 5 different versions of something. And not only would that allow me to iterate in more of a similar way that you would if you were jamming with other people or playing in a band, but it also allowed me to think of different ways and figure out different ways quite naturally of approaching the same motifs. And for a concept album of this type, that was quite a valuable way of, I guess, composing something that felt same but different.
Yeah, and also it keeps you organized
Yeah.
as well
Oh, yeah.
as with the ideas that you're trying to convey on this new concept album. So when you're creating the music and everything, what inspires you the most to create?
So to be honest, it can be kind of anything. So I'm not saying this to pat myself massively on my back, but I've always been kind of creative in everything I do, and sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse. But
I would imagine, yeah.
yeah, and I've been a professional creative for most of my career. I started out working in theater. I started working in different things. Currently, I work as a creative marketer. Like, I help create marketing material. I help create marketing plans, and I'm also writing books with people. Like, I do a lot of creative stuff, and a lot of people ask me how to stay consistently inspired by things. Like, what do you do to seek out inspiration? And as cliche as this may sound, I always say I don't seek out inspiration. I make sure I find it. And what I mean by that is it's almost like tuning your mind to take in anything that you do as a potential point of inspiration. And so if it could be the rhythm of something I hear, or it could be something someone says that makes me think, oh, I quite like that. Like, I used to do daily videos about a startup that I was working for on LinkedIn when I was working on that. And I wanted to do daily videos about whatever was going on, but sometimes I just wanted to diverge. And very often the ideas for that came from, like, even if I was watching a TV show or playing a video game, something would spark a little bit of an idea. And I kind of took that same approach, both from a lyrical and musical perspective here, where if I was doing something completely unrelated, I would sometimes feel this little spark where I go, yeah, I need to step away from this for a second and do something, like whether it's writing something down. And like, I ended up with so many notes on my phone, because I'd be doing something, and even just like a word or the rhythm of how someone said that word sparks something where I go, yeah, I know what I need to do with that. And I think that's been a really valuable way to, again, find inspiration everywhere. Because I think if you try to find it only in the music you already listen to, as an example, it's very easy to start writing within a box and writing quite derivative music, which is a risk, I think, when you're trying to grow as a musician and as a person. And just as an example, like, I love the games of From Software, who make Dark Souls and Elden Ring and all this.
Oh,
And
good games.
Oh, such good games. And there's something about the storytelling style of those worlds where nothing's really given to you. You kind of have to work for it, and you have to kind of pick up on these little phrases and it's very a kind of an abstract way of telling stories. But I feel that's a very nice parallel to the way that you tell stories through music, because music is a very abstract form of storytelling if you don't go the, I guess, the sort of Karak Angren way of literally telling a fairy tale over music.
Oh yeah,
If you
yeah.
so
And the power metals or different styles where they're like more in the fantasy realm, if you will.
yeah,
But yeah, it's
absolutely.
a way to tell stories. So so when it seems like you keep really busy with the writing and the music. So you also took time to do a split album that you participated for the Being There, Seeing That,
Yeah.
which is really cool what they do. And so this is the I've talked to I've talked to you now. I
Yeah.
talked to Clifford Hoyt and Serling, just Hopscotch, Battle Scars left to talk. But yeah, it's a pretty, the songs here are pretty cool indeed. For the ones that you collaborated here, that you presented, what are these songs a little bit different in the themes, or did you try to keep the same type of themes that you had on your debut?
So I would say it almost felt like a nice transition, because I'd already started working on the next album and I had some ideas written that felt more progressive metal oriented rather than the more core oriented stuff that I was writing for the next album. And for lack of a better word, they felt almost warmer in tone and kind of beefier. And I thought, this is something that I really like this, but I don't feel like it fits the album. So when they reached out to me about doing the split, I was like, yeah, this is probably where I could explore a little bit of that. And the transition kind of feeling also comes from the lyrical themes, because it's a split, I didn't feel like I needed to have both songs connected lyrically. So one of the songs is about that feeling, I guess, that the first album encompasses of feeling a little bit hopeless in a world that lacks a bit of empathy for people that don't look like you, don't act like you, or don't earn as much as you. And there was something I really liked about, when I started writing it, I thought of this idea of the title, Why Hope for Better Things. And I really liked the idea of, as the song progresses, you get these two voices kind of talking to each other. One is saying, look, we just have to take matters into our own hands. We have to change the world. And the other one saying, well, why should we even hope for it? Why should we hope for better things when it's burning, when it's falling down?
Yeah, that's
Only for
the
it.
why hope for better things. Yeah, it's like the
Yeah.
dual, like your consciousness talking the evil
Yeah,
and the good side. That
exactly.
constant battle that we all face as human beings sometimes.
Yeah. And then I was quite, I don't know, I'm quite happy about the ending tweak to it then, when I say, why hope for better things when we can demand them? Because it's like we have to fight for them. We can't just say, oh man, I really hope that works out, thoughts and prayers. Like
Yeah,
it's not going to change
I hate
anything.
that word when they say,
Yeah.
for example, it's here the school shootings here in the United States
Yeah.
is crazy. Back home in Puerto Rico, never. There's never been a school shooting. It's something unheard of. I think people here are obsessed with guns, and everyone thinks like it's the Wild West, that they need their guns, and
Yeah.
they forget like mental health. And for example, what happened with Roe versus Wade? So they're not okay with killing unborn. They don't want no one to do abortions, but screw the children in the
Yeah.
schools.
Oh, absolutely.
Like
They're pro-life until they're born.
that doesn't make sense to me. And me being a father and having two kids young that go to school, it's a constant fear that I have. Like I would
Oh,
hate like to have something like that happen.
of
So
course.
it's like a parent's worst nightmare, and it's an issue that it seems like they've been battling this since more. Like I remember Columbine back in the 90s,
Yeah.
and this is still an issue, and everyone says thoughts and prayers, but thoughts and prayers don't do shit. You need
No.
change and policy
Yeah.
to make things like really change, and
100%.
keep the children safe in a like a teacher should not need to have a gun. Like she's a teacher, she studied to teach people, not to be an army. It's it's
Yeah.
stupid, but it's something that I hope that in my lifetime this changes, because it's like seeing so many children dying that way, and the problem with the mental health. And my actual work is in healthcare. Uh, it's something that really needs to be addressed and change, because we can't keep losing human beings this way for something that could be easily fixed. That's my opinion. I have a strong opinion on that as well. So
Oh,
yeah.
I'm totally there with you. And like, I remember when I was living out in Miami, I lived about 15-20 minutes from the Parkland school shooting. And I remember that march in Washington and everything. And I remember, again, that mix of hope and hopelessness, where I thought, I really hope this is the one that, breaks the camel's back. Hopefully this is the thing that makes people realize we have to change. But then again, I hope that around Sandy Hook, I hope that so many times, but we can't hope. We have to demand better things.
We have to demand and do, and
Yeah.
vote, and
Yeah.
demand change. So Jon, it's been great chatting with you about the music and about these topics. It's a very serious conversations that we had. Not everything can be all fun. You need to have these conversations. So people, you can stream the music. The split is out, and you can also stream the debut album. If they want to buy physical copies, do you have them, or it's more digital?
So I have physical copies. I have only about 4 copies left of, or it might be 3. You can check them out on Bandcamp of the splits. And of the physical album, I still have a few left of that too. And I know that if you're in the States, then there are a few of the other bands. So Serling and Clifford Hoyt are both in the States, and Hopscotch in Canada. So I think everyone has maybe 2 or 3 copies left each. So if you're looking for copies, depending on which side of the Atlantic you're on, you might want to hit me up or one of the others. But the debut, obviously, the others don't have copies of that, so you're going to have to hit me up for that. And
right to you.
Later this year, the follow-up will also have some physical copies. So
nice. I can't wait to listen to that one, and probably we can talk about that one too, or I could review it. So I'll post a link so people can go check that out. So I want to thank you, for taking the time to talk with me. And people do check out Kilprez music. It's really something that can be put in a same genre. It has a little bit of everything and some great guitar work on it. So
thanks, man.
So until next time, this is Hector, the Shield doing a couch, and I'll see you right here on the couch. Thank you and good night.